Welcome back to Forbidden Archives, everyone. You know the drill, the Illuminati conspiracy, myths, manuscripts, all that good stuff. We're back to pull back the curtain on, one of history's, well, most feared and misunderstood secret societies, really.
Is a big one?
Huge, right? And so much of it, this whole mystique, it all comes back to, it really boils down to, well, fear and power and philosophy. Yeah, it's a potent cocktail that seems to still have a grip on the world today, centuries later. I mean, you see it everywhere.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how this one group has captured the imagination for so long.
Absolutely. So buckle up, folks. We're going deep. This is Season 1, Episode 11, The Mind Behind the Shadows, The Rise, Fall, and Legacy of Adam Weishaupt. Let's dive in.
When you hear the name Adam Weishaupt, I mean, it feels, I don't know, kind of loaded, right? Like there's so much baggage attached to it.
Oh, totally. It's almost like saying Voldemort, he who may not be named. But we're going to name him. We're going to unpack his story, try to understand the man behind the myth.
Exactly. And that's what we're doing today, really diving deep into, the historical record, looking at his life, what motivated him, what he was trying to achieve, peel back those layers of conspiracy, all the sensationalism, and just see what the historical context was.
It's like an archaeological dig, brushing away the dust of centuries to uncover the real story.
Exactly.
So where do we even begin with a figure like Weishaupt? I mean, his origins, his upbringing, it all seems so shrouded in mystery.
Well, it all starts, like many stories do, with a birth. In this case, it's Ingolstadt, Bavaria, February 6, 1748. Johann Adam Weishaupt enters the world.
Ingolstadt, Bavaria. I'm already picturing like cobblestone streets, medieval castles, that kind of vibe.
Yeah, very much that sort of setting. And, like a pivotal event early on shaping his life, his father passes away when he's only 5 years old. So young Adam's education, his upbringing, it falls to his godfather, Johann Adam von Eckstedt.
Okay, so this von Eckstedt character, he's got to be important. I mean, talk about influence during those formative years.
Oh, absolutely crucial. Von Eckstedt was this, esteemed professor of law, a strong advocate for the Enlightenment, the ideas of Christian Wolff, all about reason and individual inquiry. So he instills this deep appreciation for rational thought in Weishaupt.
So right from the get-go, we've got logic, Enlightenment principles, all baked into his worldview.
Exactly.
What about his formal education? The schooling, the institutions, what did that look like?
So Weishaupt's education begins at a Jesuit school, age 7, and it continues all the way to the University at Ingolstadt. Now, get this, he earns a doctorate in law in 1768. He's only 20 years old at this point.
20? That's like younger than some people are when they graduate college these days.
It's remarkable, right? A sign of, well, a pretty sharp intellect, clearly.
For sure. And what about his career? I mean, did this academic prodigy just like shoot straight to the top?
Pretty much. In 1772, he becomes, professor of law. It's after converting to Protestantism, by the way. And then there's this pivotal moment, this turning point in 1773. The Jesuit order is suppressed. And this creates an opening, a vacancy. And guess who steps in?
Weishaupt, professor of canon law.
You got it. It's like, a real changing of the guard. This young, ambitious Weishaupt right in the thick of it. And his intellectual journey continues, right? It doesn't stop there. In 1775, he's introduced to the empirical philosophy of Johann Georg Heinrich Feder.
Okay, now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of 18th century philosophy. Give us the layman's version. Who was this Feder guy and what were his ideas all about?
So Feder's philosophy was all about sensory experience, like what we perceive through our senses. That's the primary source of knowledge. And it definitely influenced Weishaupt. And both of them, Feder and Weishaupt, they actually opposed Kant's ideas later on, Kant's more abstract, idealist philosophy. So you see Weishaupt's right there engaging with the big philosophical debates of the time.
Yeah, he's not just passively absorbing knowledge, he's challenging it, debating it, really wrestling with these big ideas. Okay, so we've got this picture emerging of Weishaupt, this brilliant, ambitious academic, steeped in Enlightenment thought, challenging the status quo. But how does this lead to the creation of a secret society, the Illuminati? Like, what's the missing link here?
Well, it's interesting. He actually said himself that he wanted to, harness this human tendency towards secret societies. He saw that they were often misused or, focused on frivolous things. And he thought, no, there's got to be a real and worthy goal here. We can use this for the benefit of people, right? He felt like he could achieve what the established powers, the religious and secular authorities, they were failing.
So he saw a gap, a void that needed filling. And he believed that a secret society, properly structured and guided, could actually be a force for good.
Exactly. A tool for change, for progress. And that's where the Illuminati comes in.
And it all begins, the birth of the order, May 1, 1776, in Bavaria.
Bavaria, right? And the name Illuminati comes from the Latin illuminatus, which of course means enlightened. And within this order, he adopts this alias, Brother Spartacus.
Brother Spartacus. Talk about a name with some, revolutionary baggage.
Right, challenging authority.
Okay, so we've got the when and the where, but what about the why? What were the core goals of this group? Because this is where, things get really murky, the historical accounts start to diverge, the conspiracy theories take root.
And it's interesting, even at the time, there were different interpretations, like the Catholic Encyclopedia in 1910. It suggested that, well, the Illuminati wasn't internally democratic, but they wanted to spread, ideas of equality and freedom, throughout society. But then you have Collier's encyclopedia, and they focus more on, combating religion, promoting pure rationalism. But, the big picture, the overarching vision, it seems to have been, well, freeing humanity from what Weishaupt saw as, the shackles of religious dogma and undermining those in power, corrupt governments.
It's a revolutionary agenda, no doubt about it. But how did they put this plan into action? What did the Illuminati actually do?
Imagine this, a super secret, network of spies and counter-spies, right? It's very cloak and dagger, like isolated cells of members. And each one, they report to a superior, but they don't even know who that superior is.
Wow, that's like next level secrecy.
Right. And this whole hierarchical structure, it was designed to maintain control, to keep things under wraps. And you know what? It's interesting because this very model, it was later adopted by, organizations that needed to operate discreetly.
Yeah, the blueprint for clandestine operations, you can see the influence.
Absolutely. And you can't talk about the Illuminati without talking about Freemasonry.
Right, the connection's always there.
Yeah, in 1777, he joins the Masonic Lodge Theodor zum Guten Rat in Munich. And, he saw this as a way to recruit, a vehicle to advance his goals. It was fertile ground. His aim within Freemasonry, he wanted to bring about an illumination, as he called it, enlightening the understanding by the sun of reason, which will dispel the clouds of superstition and of prejudice. It's all very poetic, but, ultimately, his goal was to perfect human nature through re-education, aiming for this, utopian state of communal harmony, free from government, free from organized religion.
So in a way, he was trying to co-opt Freemasonry, right? Use it for his own ends.
That's one way to look at it, yeah. And he had some success, too, by presenting their system as, the pure, authentic form of Freemasonry. He managed to, with the help of Adolf Freiherr Nigg, significantly expand the membership of the Illuminati. Nigg, he was really instrumental in, the rituals, the structure, the whole organizational side of things.
But this whole emphasis on secrecy and hierarchical control, doesn't that kind of clash with the whole Enlightenment ideal? This whole emphasis on individual reason, on questioning authority.
It's such an important point. The Enlightenment, it was all about dare to know, right? Using your own reason. But Weishaupt's Illuminati, they had very specific rules about what to read, how to think. So the name Illuminati, it's almost ironic because there was a lot of, enforced intellectual conformity going on.
It's a contradiction, right? This tension between enlightenment as an ideal and control as a method. And this tension, it's right at the heart of the historical Illuminati. It makes you wonder, if they'd been more open, more democratic, would things have turned out differently?
It's a question worth pondering. Maybe they would have flown under the radar a bit more,
Perhaps. But alas, history took a different course. What was it that finally brought down this intriguing, albeit, perhaps ironically named organization?
Well, Weishaupt, his ideas, they were pretty radical for the time, and the way he expressed them, the language he used, it proved to be a little too much for the political climate in Bavaria. And then in 1784, some of their documents, they were intercepted, and the authorities, they saw them as, well, seditious, threatening the established order. So that was it. The Elector Karl Theodor, he banned the Society of the Illuminati in 1784. Game over.
Just like that, the hammer falls. What happens to Weishaupt? Is he imprisoned? Does he disappear into the shadows?
He loses his job, his professorship at the University of Ingolstadt, and he has to flee Bavaria. But luckily, he finds refuge with Duke Ernest II of Saxe-Gotha-Altenburg. He ends up living out the rest of his days in Gotha.
So he's not entirely silenced. He needs to, live to fight another day, so to speak. And he does, right? He keeps writing, keeps defending his ideas.
He does. During his exile, he becomes quite the prolific writer, all about Illuminism, defending his actions, setting the record straight as he sees it. He writes, a complete history of the persecutions of the Illuminati in Bavaria, a picture of Illuminism, an apology for the Illuminati, and even an improved system of Illuminism.
It's like he's trying to shape his legacy, control the narrative from afar.
Absolutely.
And when does he finally, leave the stage? When does he die?
November 18th, 1830. He dies in Gotha. He's 82 years old. He had a second wife and 6 children.
A full life. And the Illuminati itself, I mean, does it continue in some form, underground after the ban, after Weishaupt's death? Or is that truly the end?
Well, based on what we've read, the suppression by the Bavarian authorities, it was pretty effective. After they were banned, the members scattered, and there's really no evidence of any lasting influence, not even on, the former members themselves. They just seem to have moved on. And this is important, I think, especially when you consider all the myths that sprung up later.
Right, because the popular image is of this, this continuous secret organization pulling the strings of history, but the reality seems to be much more, well, localized, short-lived.
Definitely.
So Weishaupt, the Illuminati, they fade into history. But what about their reputation? I mean, how did people view them at the time? How do historians view them today? Because I know our source mentions some pretty different perspectives.
Oh, absolutely. It's a real mixed bag, and it depends who you ask. Some folks back then, they had some pretty harsh things to say. Like Augustin Barruel, he acknowledged Weishaupt's goals of equality and liberty, together with the most absolute independence, but he thought they were, well, dangerous. And then there's John Roberson, who basically called Weishaupt, a human devil, said his mission was malevolent destructiveness. Pretty strong words.
Yeah, they definitely weren't fans. But it's not all doom and gloom, right? I mean, we know Thomas Jefferson had a much more, well, let's say, sympathetic view.
Yeah, Jefferson, he basically dismissed those other guys as, crazy. He saw Weishaupt as this enthusiastic philanthropist who believed that humans could be, indefinitely perfected. And it's interesting because Jefferson also thought that, well, Jesus Christ's original intention was just to reinstate natural religion and teach people to govern themselves through morality, which, aligns with some of Weishaupt's thinking too.
It's wild to think about Jefferson, this founding father, this icon of the Enlightenment, coming to the defense of, the founder of the Illuminati. And Weishaupt himself, as we mentioned earlier, he tried to defend himself, right?
Oh, yeah, he did. In 1787, he published, a brief justification of my intentions. He wanted to get his side of the story out there. And, even today, modern scholars are still trying to figure him out. Like Tony Page, he argues that Weishaupt's goal was to educate people, to reach the highest levels of humanity and morality based on reason and, the golden rule. He hoped they'd use their influence for good. Page sees the whole project as, utopian, but maybe a bit naive, and he acknowledges Weishaupt's flaws, but he doesn't think he was inherently evil or that his plans were violent. And it's ironic, isn't it, that Weishaupt, who was trying to promote virtue and social justice, he becomes this, central villain in all these modern conspiracy theories.
Yeah, it really shows you how history gets rewritten, how people and events can be, so dramatically reinterpreted and mythologized over time.
It's amazing, isn't it?
So here we are at the end of our deep dive. We've gone through Adam Weishaupt's life, his intellectual journey, the founding and structure of the Bavarian Illuminati, how it was suppressed, and all the different opinions about his character, about the true nature of his goals. It's a lot to take in.
It really is. And I think by looking at the historical evidence, we get a much clearer picture of how this, infamous secret society came to be. We see the clash of ideas, Enlightenment ideals, the realities of 18th century Bavaria, the tensions within a movement that, talked about Enlightenment but practiced control. For me, the big takeaway is how a historical phenomenon, something that was relatively short-lived, could become this, potent, enduring symbol, this boogeyman in the world of conspiracy theories.
It's truly fascinating, this gap between the historical reality of the Bavarian Illuminati and the, sprawling, ever-evolving myths that have sprung up around it. And it leaves us with a question for you, our listeners out there in podcast land. How do these historical facts, the things we've discussed today, how do they compare to the myths and fears that persist about secret societies? What does it tell us, about our need to find patterns, to explain the unexplained? We encourage you to explore further, read Weishaupt's writings, dive into the different analyses of his life and the Illuminati. There's a whole world of history out there waiting to be discovered beyond the sensational headlines.
Exactly.
And until next time, keep those archival lights burning, folks.
And stay curious.